So thank you for joining us. My name is Karen Corman, and I have the privilege of being the Executive Director of the UIC Alumni Association. Welcome to the UIC Alumni Exchange Series. Through the UIC Alumni Exchange Series, we work to bring our alumni and friends a variety of programs and topics so you can explore, connect, and even escape from the everyday with a community of UIC faculty, staff, and alumni experts. You'll hear me say this a few times today, but I encourage you to visit go.uic.edu/alumni-exchange, and I'll chat that here just in a moment, for the latest and greatest programming. And with that, I'm excited to start our program this afternoon as we are joined by UIC College of Applied Health Sciences professor, David Marquez. Every January 1st, many Americans resolve to eat better and exercise, but by the end of the month, these resolutions are often abandoned. Perhaps some of you can relate, I certainly can. Professor Marquez is here to discuss strategies for building an exercise routine so you can stick with it for the long run as he presents Keep Moving, How to Find and Keep an Exercise Routine. Thank you so much, Professor Marquez, for being with us today, and I'll turn it over to you to begin the program.
Thank you so much, Karen. It is really a pleasure to be here with you to talk to you a little bit about exercise. Before I get into the topic, I'll be just telling you a little bit about my background. I'm a born and raised Chicagoan on the north side, which by default means I'm a Cubs fan. And I went to Loyola University, Chicago for my undergraduate degree, and that was in psychology. So I've been studying human behavior for a while. And I did my master's and my PhD at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. So within our U of I system, had a position at University of Massachusetts for a few years, and then came back home to Chicago to UIC in 2007. So coming up on about 15 years. I've been studying in physical activity since I started graduate school in 1998. So for a little while. One of the things that I think particularly makes me qualified to speak on this topic is that I was part of the 2018 physical activity guidelines for Americans, where myself and 16 other scholars from across the country reviewed the literature to really examine how much physical activity should we be doing? What does that result in? And different ways in which we can try to become more motivated to engage in physical activity. So that's our topic for today, right? As Karen mentioned, we know New Year's resolutions often come and go. And I like to think of it with the analogy you might have heard that it's a marathon, not a sprint, right? In order to continue to gain the benefits, we need to keep moving and being physically active. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that with you today, and I look forward to your questions. First, I am a professor in kinesiology and nutrition. So some background terms and definitions, and you're like, oh my gosh, like I thought I finished classes. These are important, okay? They set the background for this. Why physical activity is important and how much should we be trying to achieve the very common barriers of those things that get in the way of us trying to be physically active, the most effective behavior change techniques, and then the bottom line of all of it, find movement that you enjoy. We are really fortunate here in 2022 that there are so many different types of physical activities that we can engage in. I was born in 75, so like 70s and 80s, I remember, no pain, no gain. That if you're not going hard, if you're not going vigorous, then you might as well not be doing anything. That's not the case. We know from our data that's not the case. So we'll start with a poll for you, okay? We're talking about physical activity. What is the correct definition of physical activity? So you see 4 choices there. So let's see, go ahead and take a second to read those options, and we'll go through it and see. We're talking about physical activity. And in my class, my undergraduate class, we say, when I teach them what it is, I want them to know the definition. I don't want them to kind of sort of know what it is, right? Like, let's get a definition. So then the rest of the semester, when I say physical activity, we are all talking about the same thing. Okay. So we had about 3/4 any body movement produced by skeletal muscles that results in energy expenditure. The other one that got some options, movement on a repeated basis with a specific objective. So we have some really informed people in today's Zoom. You're right, those 3/4 of you. Any movement that we do that results in energy expenditure, that is the goal, to move. Now, in our studies, we group them into 4 areas or 4 domains: leisure time, occupational, household, and transportation physical activity. Physiologically, your body doesn't really know or care how you're getting the activity, right? It will react to the movement that you're doing. The most studied is when we engage in exercise or sport. There are many occupational activities, but those have declined over the years, right? With technology, we have fewer people engaging in higher levels of occupational physical activity. Transportation is one, though, that's getting more attention in the literature because that's important. If you walk to work, bike to work, walk to the train, bike to the train, any one of these things, excellent, you are moving. So really, physical activity is any movement. Exercise was the other definition. So exercise is physical activity, but it is distinguished because it is specifically with the goal of some sort of objective, like you're trying to improve your health or improve your fitness or performance, okay? We want people to be physically active. We know if people are able to set aside the time to exercise or to move with the purpose of improving your health, that is where the most data is, and that's what a lot of what I report on. So the definitions, somebody back in the day came up with an acronym that is nice because it's easy to remember and it fits, so to speak, right? Fit. Why are these important? The F, frequency, refers to how many days per week are you doing the physical activity. Intensity, we tend to group these into 3 categories: light intensity, moderate intensity, and vigorous intensity physical activity. So there are a couple ways in which we can measure the intensity. Usually for moderate, we think about a talk test. Let's say you're exercising with somebody else. Are you able to have a conversation, but it's not really easy? That would be light intensity, but it's also not that you're so out of breath you can't get words out. That's more likely vigorous intensity physical activity. So we have ways in which we can get more detailed with, like, a heart rate monitor, but we also have these daily ways in which we can assess intensity. So the last 2 T's, time or duration, how long are you doing the activity for? And then the type or mode. What are you doing? What is the form of that activity? Walking, running, cycling, swimming, playing a sport, all of those types of things. And so I think this is important because, well, later in this talk, I'll refer back to these principles, but there are different ways in which you can adjust to achieve certain outcomes. Why do we need to promote physical activity? I'm going to draw your attention to the right. On the left, it shows about costs of physical inactivity. I am not somebody who is in the blame game. I'm not one of the professionals who will attempt to make people feel guilty about not being physically active, because for behavior change, that does not motivate the vast majority of people to be more physically active. There are a lot of costs. I focus on something like the right. So on the x-axis, you see from 2008 to 2016. On the y-axis, you see the percentage of US adults who meet the physical activity guidelines. And the numbers for men and for women are relatively low, and it's relatively stable, right? So we would like to see, okay, if people were once inactive, let's see this increase, but we don't really see that. So there's a number of people who are not meeting the physical activity guidelines. That's for adults. We also see it for youth. When you look at high school students, you see a pretty big disparity between boys and girls. And over this 4-year period, the numbers stay pretty low. A low prevalence of high schoolers who are meeting the physical activity guidelines. And we know that there are health consequences of not being physically active. If I asked you to jot down what are the benefits of engaging in regular physical activity, you could probably come up with a number of these. This list is generated from the Physical Activity Guidelines Committee that I was fortunate enough to be a part of, and a couple points about them. Number one, there's probably not too much on here that will blow your mind and you'll say, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Okay, that's okay though. The vast, the different categories in which there are benefits, right? Things that we might not think about on a daily basis. If we're regularly physically active, we reduce our risk of dying in a shorter time period. Dying of cardiovascular disease. Okay, those are wonderful. Those are kind of research and scientific things. We don't really think about those on a day-to-day basis, and they might not motivate us. But we have aspects of the physical health. If you exercise or are regularly physically active, you lower your risk of chronic disease, such as hypertension, type 2 diabetes, and different forms of cancer. So you see the ones that have the asterisk. 2008 was the first physical activity guidelines for Americans. They were updated in 2018. And in 2018, now those that have an asterisk, there is enough data to show that, yes, you're active, you reduce your risk of all of these types of cancer. We know how prevalent cancer is. All of us have been touched in one way or another, and we can reduce our risk. But it's not just the physical body, it's the brain. You're active, you improve your cognition, and you reduce your risk of dementia, including dementia as a result of Alzheimer's disease. Maybe you think, well, that's far out into the future. I'm not as worried about that. Okay, well, what about your mental health? You're physically active, it reduces anxiety. It reduces your risk of depression. So we've got the mind, we've got the brain, we've got the body, and there's more. Sleep. Many people suffer from insomnia, have trouble falling asleep, wake up. Regular physical activity improves the quantity, but more importantly, the quality of one's sleep. And it goes on. Your bone health, right? As we get older, especially amongst women, osteoporosis tends to be a frequent condition. The activity you do earlier in age can really help you later in life. So a broad variety of benefits of physical activity. I'm going to share this interactive body map with you. So give me a second as it comes up and I do a new share so that you can see it. And this is going to be shared in the chat. So I really like this because those benefits that I talked about, you can see them in all different parts of the body. For example, stroke, okay? You scroll down, what is stroke? How does physical activity impact stroke? A 37% higher risk of having a stroke if you're physically inactive. Okay, so it gets into the statistics. These are not things that we just think, it's our opinion. No, these are rooted in science and rooted in data. So you can see for all, breaking it down by different categories and general health, you're more likely to report poor general health if you're physically inactive. Okay, so many benefits of being physically active. How much should we be doing then? I showed some data, some graphs, people who are not meeting the recommendations. So I'm wondering, how much physical activity is it recommended that we do? Okay, so 4 different options there. This one admittedly is a little tricky. My students would be quite mad at me about a question like this. Oh, you're just trying to trick us. No, not necessarily, but you know, we'll see how people answer this, and we'll go through it, and I'll tell you some little caveats that are important with this question. Okay, so about 2/3 of people have voted. So what we see is 58% of people said 150 minutes per week, 38%, 30 minutes every day. Somebody also said any amount, but do it every day of the week. Okay, well, in a sense, you're all correct, right? So the key guidelines for adults, I understand there's a lot of text here. I underlined the things that I would like to draw your attention to. From the activity guidelines, there are these general comments of try to move more and sit less, because truly some physical activity is better than none. I don't just say that because it's my opinion. As soon as you start moving more, not necessarily in that moment, but as people move more, if you compare them to people who rarely or don't move at all, your risk of dying decreases. And the benefits just continue and continue no matter how much you do. So it doesn't become harmful to you over time, it only gets better. For substantial health benefits, we should be doing 150 to 300 minutes per week of moderate intensity physical activity. If you engage in vigorous physical activity, then that actually cuts it in half, 75 minutes to 150 minutes. The important thing from this is if you do some physical, you say, I just don't have the time to do that. I can only get in 30 minutes per week. Do it. Don't think it's a lost cause. From the data, some activity is better than none, okay? The other thing, 150 to 300 minutes, that's a pretty big range. So if you can fall somewhere in there, that's fine. In the previous guidelines, it said that they should be done in 10-minute bouts. There is no longer evidence to show that you have to do the activity in 10-minute bouts. So while I'm talking, if you get up and kind of pace around your room for 5 minutes, it's better than sitting like I am for this entire time. Okay, so there are those what we call aerobic activity or cardiorespiratory activities, but also it's recommended that people engage in muscle strengthening activity on 2 or more days per week. Admittedly, this can be a lot for people to do. If you're a weekend warrior where Monday through Friday, you're just way too consumed with life, work and family and those things, but on the weekends, you can carve out some time. Excellent, that's fine. 150 to 300 minutes throughout a week is what is recommended to gain substantial health benefits. Perhaps you have chronic health conditions or your loved ones have chronic health conditions. In short, the physical activity guidelines are the same as the general guidelines, except there's important caveats. People with chronic health conditions should do activity according to their abilities and should avoid inactivities. And if you have one of these chronic diseases, you should be under the care of a healthcare provider. What we've learned over the years is that it's not just moving our body that's important. It's also sitting less. Studies show, let's say you go to the gym in the morning and then you sit for your entire workday, you're at an increased risk of poor health relative to people who are getting up and moving at a moderate intensity during the day. So if you are extremely sedentary, this doesn't include sleep, okay? Sedentary is sitting, lying down. You have an increased risk of dying from cardiovascular disease, acquiring cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and these 3 different types of cancers. So in the Physical Activity Guidelines Committee, this heat map was developed, which showed ideally we want to be in this lower right-hand corner. We do high levels of moderate or vigorous physical activity, and we do low levels of daily sitting time. But we know we are not all there. And sometimes due to our jobs, it's not necessarily our fault. It's the nature of the job. So you can see colors here, and we want to be in the green, and you see some yellow and red here. Somebody here sits a lot and also doesn't move a lot, okay? Now, I love this because it's a heat map. It shows where you want to be. This is the type of thing that I like to show, that we say these things from data. So my colleague, Dr. Peter Kaczmarzyk at the Pennington in Louisiana, you can't see these very well, but there's columns of blue numbers and columns of green numbers. Every single one of these cells has a number in it. This is the data that populates this heat map. So the data was laid out, color was added based upon what the number was, and we came up with this heat map. And here's the important bottom line from this. You might not want to hear this, but it's from the data. It takes approximately 600 minutes of moderate intensity physical activity per week to go from here to here. So if you have a lot of daily sitting time, you need to do even more physical activity than the regular guidelines to overcome or counterbalance all of that sitting. So moderate to vigorous physical activity should really be a part of our everyday lifestyle, but especially for those people who sit for large portions of the day. Many times people will ask about steps. Well, how many steps should I be doing? And you might have heard 10,000 steps per day. And if you are getting 10,000 steps per day, that is phenomenal. Keep doing it. That number was not necessarily rooted in rigorous science. What the rigorous science has shown is that if you're doing between 7,000 and 9,000 steps per day, that will get you to meet the weekly physical activity guidelines, okay? So what this is saying is, if in your daily activities, like not exercising or not trying to walk more, you might get 2,000 steps per day, which is pretty low, but then you can add in 5,000 with purposeful walking. So 10,000, excellent, keep doing. If you're like, oh my gosh, I can't seem to get more than 8,000 steps per day, it's okay, right? You are doing a lot, you are doing well, and you are doing enough to achieve those health benefits. Question, here's a poll. If being physical activity is so good for us, then why aren't the majority of people doing it? Referring back to that graph, we saw, 20, maybe 30% of Americans are meeting the physical activity guidelines. We know that it's good for us, but not a lot of people are doing it on a regular basis. So what would you say are what's the main reason why people are not physically active at the recommended levels? Okay, so we got about 75% of people. So all of the above: not enough time, injury, don't know what to do, and too tired were the 4 options. Most people said all of the above. A handful of people, not enough time, and a couple people don't know what to do. So here we go. Everybody is correct. I guess if this were a quiz or an exam, we'd say all of the above, because these are genuine barriers that people have. Maybe these next two slides will be most useful to you or to other people that you might be trying to encourage to be exercised. We're going to go through these. This is where I come from. Some people, exercise professionals even, will say there's no excuse for not exercising. Right? There is no excuse. And they see them as excuses rather than barriers or like things that get in the way of exercising. Many times those people are younger, maybe in college, and don't yet have full-time job, a family, that type of thing. But sometimes even those people. Where I come from, and a lot of other people come from, these are genuine barriers. A barrier is something that gets in the way of where you're trying to go. I would rather help people and have them discover ways to overcome those barriers rather than blaming and saying, it doesn't matter. You don't have an excuse. You should always be exercising. Because life happens. And in COVID, life has happened, however, tenfold, 100-fold, etc. And it is difficult. I personally exercise almost every day now, but I have privileges other people don't have. And I wasn't always this way, right? So I've incorporated from the science and some of my thoughts that have helped me to be physically active over time. I don't have enough time, no matter what segment of the population we're talking about. This is the number one barrier that people report. Remember, every movement counts. Some is better than none. More is better than some. Okay, every movement counts. And that first point there's that fit principle. Maybe you can't do it as many times per week as you would like. You can adjust these things as you want, right? So there is high intensity training, which is meant to take less time, but at a higher intensity of physical activity. It sounds great theoretically. However, if you're new to exercising or getting back into exercising, I would not recommend something that's high intensity vigorous right off the bat, because your body is likely going to feel miserable the next few days, right? We have this delayed onset muscle fatigue that happens, right? So you can modify these things. And remember, every movement counts. Some people will say, well, I just don't have the energy. I'm too tired. Once again, look at the fit principle. How can you maybe do smaller amounts on more days of the week or on the weekends if you have a little bit more time? Because the thing with energy, this is what we say as exercise professionals, it actually increases energy. There's no doubt there is data to show that. For me, the caveat is it's more like in the long term. Yeah, when you start being physically active, you might be a little bit more tired on those days or right afterwards, but no, you are building your system. You are building your body to withstand, these things coming at you. And so in time, exercise does increase energy. I'm just not motivated, right? So many people will say this. I'm with you. I am not motivated every day. Yesterday, I was going to get up early and exercise, and I just couldn't get myself to do it, right? A couple of things that I think are really important. Start low and go slow. You don't have to start off by running 5 miles in a day. That's actually, for many people, going to go the opposite way. You're going to feel miserable. The next few days, you're going to feel miserable and be like, why would I want to do this? You don't have to. Remember, this is something we hope to commit to for the long term. So start small. Go for a walk for 5 minutes. Maybe go for a walk for 10 minutes. And then if you add 1 minute each day, or add 1 minute every other day, soon, right? Remember, if we're trying to do this for our lifetime, a few months is just a sliver of time. And soon you're walking for a half hour. You're walking for 45 minutes. So start low, go slow, and commit to it. Little by little, we will get there. One of the things that I use, I do this, so I tend to injure myself quite frequently and I can't do the activity I want. And so I think okay, I'm going to get back to where I was, but I'm not there right now. So I'm going to lay off a little bit, lighter intensity, shorter duration, and build up. Start low, go slow, and then it builds little by little. And then for me, if I think to myself, this is really important to me and my health, I'm going to find a way to do this. All right. Another one, it costs too much. Well, maybe you're like me, many of us haven't gone to the gym in a while because we don't necessarily want to be exposed to potential COVID. There is so much available. YouTube videos, so many good things via YouTube that are free. I subscribe to cable. And so for a while, I was doing on-demand workouts, which were free. So there are ways to do things. And that's like if you want to program, if you can get outside, if you can find a way, we know that just being out in the fresh air and amongst nature is really beneficial for our mood as well. That's a way to find low-cost activities. I'm sick or I'm hurt. It's okay, right? It's okay to take a break, especially when you're sick or you're hurt. You don't want to do more damage to your body. I'll get to this. We can plan for relapses. We can have alternative plans, and it is okay to take a break. I know exercise professionals who will say, never give in, right? Never. You can burn yourself out, and many people will end up burning themselves out. I feel awkward when I exercise. Oh my gosh, this is so common in today's society. I would say fitness facilities, gyms, your local gym, they have been some of the most unwelcoming places I have ever stepped foot in. And for the most part, I know what I'm doing. I know how to use equipment. It's just, and then if you think other people are looking at you, I feel awkward. So it's very common. The idea through all of this, focus on yourself and not so much on the other people. And I'll say, if you have a mindset of F them, forget them, and their potential thoughts, just focus on it. Don't worry about other people. You can buddy up, right? So you get out that nervous energy if you exercise with somebody else, with a friend of yours. Maybe they feel awkward as well. Then you have you have that social support. And from the previous slide, maybe you can start in your home to gain some confidence so that when you do go for an exercise outside or with a class or at a gym, then you have increased your self-confidence. It's called self-efficacy. In the academic literature, you build confidence in yourself to do things. I don't know how to do it. This is something that I think is often overlooked with exercise. So for the most part, if we have the ability, we know how to walk, right? But how fast should you be walking? Where should your heart rate be? If you go to a gym, I don't know how to use this equipment. Dumbbells, I have no idea how to start resistance training. Like, what is some weight that I should start with? So the idea is find somebody who does, who you know, who you trust. That is what I would say is number one. Somebody who is genuinely interested in helping you rather than criticizing you. If you're at a fitness facility, you can usually ask for help. It's not asking necessarily for a personal trainer, which you can do that you might need to pay for, but have somebody teach you how to use equipment, and find that person that you trust. Two more. No one will watch my child if I exercised. Social support, diffusion of responsibilities, right? Other people picking up the load. A lot of us in today's society find it difficult to ask people to have for their help. Um, it's important, right? And this is where, when I've had family members, my wife, trying to exercise, sometimes, yeah, it's going to influence your schedule, but you think about it in the grander scheme of things, right? We want to be healthy. We want to feel good. Exercise can help get us there. Many fitness facilities have childcare. I don't know about them so much during COVID, but as hopefully we can progress out of COVID, those are opportunities. And then to incorporate the children into the workout, whether if they're much littler, my daughter who's now 15, she remembers me putting her in a running stroller and like she loved it. It was like a ride. Okay. And I'm not much of a runner, so we wouldn't be out for that long, but she remembers that and it was something that we did together. So if there's ways you can incorporate children into your workouts, there's no one to exercise with me, that's social support. Some people hate exercising with other people. Other people need it, want it. It's up to you, right? Nobody's going to make you exercise with somebody or not. So find somebody that can help hold you accountable and you can hold them accountable. And then identify different types of activities that you can do on your own. You feel comfortable, you know how to do them, right? So these are some of the most common things that people say and potential ways to overcome them. In the end, I'll be honest, it's hard, right? It is really hard to be physically active on a regular basis. We keep trying, we keep fighting to find a way to be physically active as much as we can. So let's say you're trying to change your behavior. You're trying to be more physically active. To start physical activity, these are the most common behavior change not the most common, these are the most effective behavior change techniques for starting physical activity. And then for maintaining physical activity, once you've been doing it for say 6 months, problem solving is another one. So I'll take you briefly through these. You've heard of goal setting, right? Still, when a lot of people set exercise goals, they don't necessarily follow this idea of SMART goals. Okay, so here you can spell that out in this visual here. Some of the names are slightly different, but they get at the same thing. Specific, what do you want to do, right? Specifically, what are you going to be doing? Think about the fit, frequency, intensity, time, type, okay? And you have to be able to measure your goals over time. Maybe you're starting to walk at 10 minutes and your goal is that by the end of the month, you're able to walk for 30 minutes. The goals, the more specific they are, and you can actually measure them. Just to say like, I want to lose weight, okay, how do you know if you've achieved that? Does that mean some? Is there some number that you're looking for? So we need to make sure we can measure our progress. And they need to be achievable or attainable. If we set our goals outside of achievable, then we're likely not going to do it. And then we're going to feel failure from it instead of feeling good about it. So they need to be achievable and realistic. These two kind of go hand in hand. And then timely or time-based. When are you trying to achieve this goal by? Is it within the next month? Within 6 months? Okay, so we have these goals, and the more details we can provide, the more likely we are to achieve them. The second one is called action planning, which is concrete. When, where, and how are you going to do your physical activity? For me, I really want to be physically active on most days of the week, so I will actually put it into my calendar. Do I always exercise at that hour? No, but many times I do because it's part of my plan, right? I have this action, I know when, where, how, and actually what exercise I'm going to do at that time. if we schedule things, I don't know how you are with meetings, but a lot of times I'll be in a group that says, well, should we set a meeting date now, or should we just wait and see? And unanimously is let's put it in the calendar now. If it's in the calendar, it's more likely we're going to do it than if it's not in the calendar, there's a good chance it's not going to happen. Same with exercise, okay? So make those action plans. With technology, our ability to self-monitor has become so much better and so much easier. Not everybody has access to like an Apple Watch or a Fitbit, but many of us do. And over time, they have more and more options that are available. So you can monitor your heart rate, you can monitor your sleep. How many minutes of moderate intensity physical activity are you doing? How many steps are you getting? And you don't even have to pay attention to these things, right? The monitor will record it. And then like here, this is an example from Fitbit, I believe. I don't endorse Fitbit in any way, but sometimes their stuff is pretty prevalent, where you can see how many steps. You can see over the course of the day, where were you active? Where were you not active? What was your heart rate over time? So you can see, were you doing light intensity, moderate intensity, vigorous intensity? So all of these things can help. They won't necessarily help initiate the activity, but once we start it, these things can help. We can see that information and learn from it. 4th out of 5, reinforce progress. It's okay to reward yourself. You might have heard before about extrinsic motivation and intrinsic motivation, right? Extrinsic, it's something outside of you that is motivating you to be physically active. Over time, it needs to switch to intrinsic, where you're just being active because you really like being physically active. But that might not be the case when you're starting or when you're jumping back into it. So praise, encouragement, attention, rewards are all very powerful. Reinforce the progress. Know what's of value to you, and it's okay to give yourself rewards within reason, right? Don't come back and say, yeah, and then you tell your partner, yeah, but this professor said that we could reward ourselves. It can be a good thing, but the bigger thing, focus on process and effort. Too often in society, no matter what it is, we forget about the process and we're only focused on the outcome. We lose the enjoyment of the process. We don't live in the moment. That's where we can really get fulfillment. So that's life in general, but it's also the exercise process. When you see yourself working hard, when you can go back to a graph, or you can look at a self-monitor yourself and see, dang, I have really been putting in the effort, and you become very proud of yourself, which is nice because that can help keep you going. The one that's very important for maintenance of physical activity is problem solving. And the idea is that you know what are like high risk times of you not being physically active, so you can plan ahead. Classic examples when you go on vacation. Now, I know people who say, when I go on vacation, I'm on vacation. The last thing I want to do is exercise. Fine, right? Other people will want to exercise, say, on vacation, but they know that it's going to be really difficult for them to be able to do that. So plan ahead. No matter what the barrier that's going to be in the future that you know is coming, plan ahead for it. Also, a lapse is normal and inevitable and not a sign of failure and hopelessness. Okay. We have times where we don't do the behavior that we intend to do. It's okay. It's being able, right, when you're knocked down, being able to stand back up. I didn't exercise yesterday and I really wanted to. You know what? I'm going to exercise this afternoon, and I have even more motivation now to do it because I didn't do it yesterday. I'm actually really looking forward to that. So it's okay to have these lapses. It's not a sign of failure and hopelessness. So moving forward, start low, go slow, and try to get yourself to be accepting of that. Maybe you exercise regularly and then you injure yourself and you want to jump right back into it. It's okay not to do that, because hopefully you have time to build that up. Accept that psychologically. This is a process. You're going to get there. I note, and you know, there are many competing activities that are really reinforcing. Well, I like to sit on the couch, watch some Netflix with my family, right? For me, it's okay. I'm not doing it in all of my downtime. I'm not sitting the entire day, but you have to realize these things are reinforcing, and you're going to have competing activities. So be aware of them. For me and a lot of other people, something can be overwhelming if we don't break it down. Maybe at work you have a big project, or with your home life you have some housing project going on, and it's like the magnitude is just overwhelming. But when you're able to break it down, it's not so bad, right? You break it down into steps where it's part of a process, and then it won't stress us out so much. It won't be so overwhelming. The last 2 points are related. Find what works for you. If you enjoy doing yoga, that is phenomenal. Do yoga. Yoga is wonderful because there's so many different modifications of poses that can be done, right? It's not like, I remember back in the day on Channel 11, WTTW, there was this woman who did yoga, and she was like ridiculously flexible. And me and my sisters would like try to do it as a joke because it was so like nobody could do it. That's not the way it is anymore, right? Find what works for you. If you like dancing, I do research in dancing, go dancing, right? Get your heart rate up, have fun doing it, because ultimately behaviors that we hate, which take a large amount of our time and energy, it's really unlikely that we're going to keep doing them into the long term, right? So find something you enjoy. Hopefully you enjoy investing your time and energy into it. Your return on your investment likely, hopefully, will be very high then. Okay, some acknowledgements of two PhD students that work with me, Michelle and Miguel, and Juan Pinto, an undergraduate student doing work with me and my research team. They provide incredible amounts of support, information for this presentation, and the like. And so thank you so much for your time. I think, let's see, I have 12:51, so we do have some time for questions. There's my name, that's my email address if you want to get in contact with me. I'm on Twitter, that's my Twitter handle. Well, a lot of times I will share out research studies that have recently been published. And the last one there is my lab's website, talks a little bit more about what we do, who we are, when we've been in the news about our research, so interviews and that type of thing. So again, thank you so much for listening, and happy to take some questions and have some discussion.
Well, thank you, Professor Marquez. This has been wonderful. And thank you for all the wonderful tips and just thinking about exercise differently. I think we could probably do another session on how to dance and how to find your passion in exercise. There have been a couple questions that have come in. So if you'll allow me, the first question, which probably won't surprise you given the frigid temperatures in Chicago today, do you have any tips for exercising in the cold?
Yes. So we know that when it's frigid like today, you do have to make sure that your skin is covered, right? The longer you're out there, the more you run into the potential for getting frostbite. Also, just less serious, but like the windburn. Sunglasses are recommended because it's so bright, and with the snow, the light reflecting off the snow, those are important. With the cold, a lot of times it's layers. Layers are important. I'll be honest, I started getting into running about a year ago, and I asked a friend of mine who's also an academic, and he runs marathons and ultra marathons. And I said, when I go out, I get so hot. when I go for a run, right? He said, well, what are you wearing? And I would tell him, and he's like, you're wearing way too much, right? You're actually going to be too hot. So layers, a windbreaker. I'll wear, like long underwear and running pants. And as long as you have your skin covered, I said, well, what about my face? And this was last year in the middle of a pandemic. He's like, do you have one of those gaiters, which we know now don't really work so well for COVID, but I did have one. And he said, that's perfect, right? So when I go out, I have this really thin gaiter up to here. I've got sunglasses and I've got a regular hat. And I don't have any, skin directly exposed. There's thin gloves. You can buy running gloves. He said, I'd go to Walmart and buy those like $3, just like thin kinds, because you need your hands, your extremities will get cold, but you don't have to spend a whole lot of money on these kinds of things. And if what you're wearing, if it's like a windbreaker type thing, that can be helpful also in this weather. So it was really great tips. And depending on how vigorous, I do like a walk run. And so I walk and then I'll run, like this interval. And I get hot pretty quickly, even with like just those few a couple layers that I'm wearing. So that's something, but you do have to be prepared for this cold because it can be dangerous. And now we know too, with the recent snow and then ice, right? Snow and ice, these are barriers. Somebody might say, there's no excuse. I'm telling you, getting out did people shovel, right? Is there ice that you're going to slip on? In your neighborhood, is it safe to maybe run in the streets? Some places there are, some places are definitely not, because you're going to slip or fall. So there are ways to do it, but then also maybe coming indoors would be a way until the temperatures go up a little bit until you get outside.
A little more tolerable, which hopefully will be soon.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. It will get better.
It will get better. That's right.
It will get better. It will get warmer, which I view as better.
You and me both. You had mentioned that obviously in many people's jobs, we sit all day long, and that, that people that are moving more, obviously their health is better. Is there any, could you comment at all about standing desks? I know a lot of people now have standing desks, and is there any research that you are aware of about how long you should maybe stand versus sitting all day, and what would be ideal perhaps?
Yes. So I think in general, standing desks are a good thing for health because they do break up that sedentary behavior. Now, devil's in the details, right? If you're standing for hours and hours straight, it's likely or possible that your posture is not so good anymore, right? So these are things that you might start to notice with low back pain or something like that, but you might not be as aware of in the beginning. I like standing desks because it gives you the opportunity, right? So you put it up for, 15 minutes, and then you put it down, and then however, there's not a definition of you should, stand for X number of days, X number of hours per day. Actually, from the physical activity guidelines, we say move more and sit less, but we don't give a number yet for how much you should sit or how much you shouldn't sit, because the data is really hard to get that fine grained. Hopefully in the near future, somewhat near future, we'll be able to, but it's breaking up the sitting that's really important, especially for those, research shows those who are diabetic, right? Mm-hmm. And with blood sugar to stand up and move around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I have one more question, but I just want to point out that our colleague posted that if UIC alumni would like to use campus recreation facilities, there is an alumni membership that they offer it's extremely good discount, and our recreation facilities are beautiful. So that link is in chat.
Yeah, that's, if I can just say that is wonderful because it's discounted. And wow, when you talk about options of different things you can do, I mean, Campus Rec has just phenomenal a number of things you can do that it's likely there's something that you'll like there.
I agree. I mean, it's just the facilities are beautiful. So my last question, if you have to choose 8 hours of sleep over daily exercise, which should you choose? I should say the last question given to me. That was not my question.
Yeah. Well, my answer is always, it depends. What is the goal of it? Here's the thing about exercise. You saw that slide, mental health, cognitive health, physical health. We talk about exercise as medicine. And if you take your dose daily or, per week, there's so many benefits, and it can improve your sleep as well. So if you ask a sleep doctor, my guess is they would say sleep is what you want to go with. As somebody in kinesiology, I would choose exercise.
Not quite a surprise there, but thank you. Well, thank you so much, Professor Marquez, for this wonderful presentation and sharing all of your efforts and research and knowledge with all of us. We're so proud that you're on faculty at UIC and so grateful for all of your time today. Just to close this out, please join us for our next Alumni Exchange program on Tuesday, March 1st at noon Central Time, as we will be joined by another UIC College of Applied Health Sciences professor, Dr. Leah Leibowitz. Do you know anyone, or have you ever had feelings of doubt, inadequacy, and worry that you'll be discovered as a fraud, despite evidence of competency, accomplishment, and success? This is known as imposter syndrome. Perhaps you've heard about it. It's been in the news quite a bit lately. And Dr. Leibowitz will clarify what it really is and discuss some ways to manage it as she presents strategies for combating imposter syndrome. To find a recording of this episode or our past episodes, please go to go.uic.edu/alumniexchange. And of course, please be on the lookout for that brief survey that I mentioned at the beginning. Thank you again so much, Professor Marquez, for this wonderful presentation. Thank you to all of you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at a future UIC Alumni Exchange program. Thanks again, and have a great rest of your day.